Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Top 10 Desert Island Albums. So this is always fun, right? You're stranded on a desert island. You can only take 10 albums with you. These are the only 10 you're going to be able to listen to for the rest of your life. So what would it be? For me, these albums here that I've selected are perfect. They're my favorite go-to albums by these bands here. Not a bad song on the albums itself, making them all albums I can't live without and thereby would have to take with me to a desert island. So we're going to jump into this here in just a bit and get started. But before we do, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on really cool videos just like this with 10 desert island album picks here. So coming in at number 10, Judas Priest, Painkiller from 1990, 12th studio album. Now this was my first Judas Priest album, and that's part of the thing I'm going to try and delineate here as I show you these, whether they were my first or not, as to how I got into something. But this one here was so much heavier than anything else I was listening to at the time. I was big into the glam metal stuff like that. So this one here really opened me up to a lot of different things that were heavier and stuff like that. But there was also a lot of melody in this. And the funny thing is that despite it being the heaviest thing that I was listening to at the time, it became one of the albums that I would fall asleep to every night. And it just has that comforting feel for some reason. And I don't know why that is, but this album, if I cannot fall asleep at night, if I put this one on here, I can go to sleep. Not because it's boring or anything, maybe just because it's so comforting. I don't know. But that's one of the key things here. And I'm not only taking albums that I absolutely love, but I'm taking ones that are functional as well. Okay, coming in at number 9, Rush, Roll the Bones, 1991, 14th studio album. This was my first Rush album, and it was a return to commercial success for the band. And I think part of the reason that drew me in was not only that popularity there, but also that the album itself was kind of more hard rock than the straight up prog style stuff that they were doing. So it pulled me in that way, but it was also an album that opened me up to prog, and I've got a lot of fond memories behind it. And I enjoyed the hits that came off it at the time. Dreamline was an excellent song. Roll the Bones, the title track, and Ghost of a Chance. But I actually liked a number of the deeper cuts on here, Bravado being one of them. That is a song I go back to all the time. Even if I'm going to listen to one track off this album, it's going to be that. Where's My Thing, an instrumental on here, and Neurotica, all of those. And again, as I said about all of these, every song on these albums I loved. So it's not a matter of there even being favorites over non-favorites and that sort of thing. It's just that they're so good. All right, next one up. AC/DC, Fly on the Wall, 1985, 10th studio album. Not my first AC/DC album. So the first one I actually picked up was The Razor's Edge. That was actually my first concert as well. But surprisingly, this has become my favorite AC/DC album over time. And I know a lot of people don't like the production on it, don't think the songs on it are very good. And I don't really understand that personally, because I love it. I love everything about this album from start to finish. And where I try to kind of figure out, like, well, why is it that this album became such a popular one with me? And I think it has to do with the Stephen King movie Maximum Overdrive, where they use AC/DC music in it. And that one in and of itself, they released the soundtrack Who Made Who that had a lot of hits and stuff on it as well. But as part of that, they used several songs from Fly on the Wall in it. So I was getting Fly on the Wall that way. You're getting it as the album itself. So it's just kind of an extra pummeling of cool AC/DC tracks. And I think that's partly why I latched onto this one here. But I love the songs Shake Your Foundations, First Blood, Sink the Pink, Playing with Girls. Like, all those songs on here are just so good that for whatever reason, I reach for this album left and right. Probably too because other ones are just so overplayed, kind of a thing. This one here, for the last 30 years, I've been able to throw on and I've never gotten tired of it. So that's one of the things also. I got to be able to take this to a desert island and listen to it repeatedly over and over, not get tired of it. Well, for me, it's AC/DC's Fly on the Wall. All right, another one here. Growing up, I was a huge Motley Crue fan. So coming in at number 7, Decade of Decadence, 1991, first compilation album that they put out. Not my first Motley Crue album. The first one that I actually bought was Dr. Feelgood, but I owned all 5 of their first albums before this came out. And while it is a compilation, it's not like a typical greatest hits because it's got new material, unreleased material, different versions, re-recordings of the big songs that are on here. So for me, when I owned all those albums and then they put out a compilation, I probably wouldn't have bought it if it was just a greatest hits. But it was worth picking up. And I remember thinking, wow, Motley Crue gave me value for my money, because even though I owned these songs, I got different versions of stuff. And I was a diehard Motley Crue fan at the time. But there were 3 new songs on here, including Primal Scream, which is one of my favorite songs by the band. So getting it, having brand new song, loving that song on here and stuff like that. And it's one of those ones that I still find very interesting to go back and hear, because it's not the same studio recorded version of this stuff over and over and over, like on just regular greatest hits and things of that nature. So I still love Decade of Decadence after all these years, and not being able to decide on one Motley Crue album, I've gone for this compilation here. All right, number 6, Poison, Flesh and Blood from 1990, 3rd studio album. Not the first Poison album I heard. That was Open Up and Say Ah, but I didn't buy that. I didn't own it. It was a friend of mine's. This was the first album that I bought. So I was already a fan of Poison, and then this came out. This was my Poison, you know, the first thing coming out while I'm a fan of theirs and so forth. And I made an immediate connection to this thing here. And it just did all the best things. I think it took the party rock from the first album, the lyrical depth and sounds that developed on the second album, but the more soulful blues rock style that was from this, and it was all merged together very nicely on here. I love this album. You know, all the singles that came off of it were great. My favorite of those was Ride the Wind. I mean, when I heard that one there, I knew this thing was for me. I had to go see him in concert. Actually, the second concert I went to was Poison. Slaughter was opening, so a lot of great memories tied up in these albums here as well. But it was the deep cuts on this, and that's the thing that keeps me coming back to this album over and over. Valley of Lost Souls, Let It Play, Come Hell or High Water, and Life Loves a Tragedy, one of my favorite songs on the album. And so I think, you know, if you love the hits and you're not tired of those, and you want to come back for the deeper cuts that are on there because you think they're just as good, to me that makes a very good Desert Island pick. Case in point with the next album I'm going to do here, number 5, Rat Detonator, 1990, 5th studio album. Not the first Rat album I heard. Again, I don't know which one that one goes to because my brothers had Rat albums, so I listened to all of their stuff. But this one here was the first one that I bought, and again, that becoming my own sort of a thing. Featuring co-writes from Desmond Child, who I think is one of the best songwriters from the 80s. I love everything that guy did back then. He just wrote some of the most amazing stuff. If he's on an album, I'm going to love it probably. But this one here, definitely not a bad song on it. The singles that came off of it, Love and Use a Dirty Job and Shame, Shame, Shame. Yeah, I dug those. But when I got the album, it was the deep cuts on this thing that I really liked. One Step Away, All or Nothing, Can't Wait on Love, Giving Yourself Away. I actually think those songs are better than what was released as the singles. I think if they had put out All or Nothing or Can't Wait on Love, this album could have been a lot bigger. But then again, it was 1990 and who knows, but all these albums, just so many good memories, and a lot of them too, like I mentioned, my brothers had Rat albums early on, so even though this isn't one of those, I am tied into this because of that. So coming along with nostalgia, great memories, family related stuff like that, and again, just making another good album to bring along to a desert island because I love it, and it's going to bring back these great memories and stuff, like the next one here. They all pretty much are. Number 4, Def Leppard Hysteria from 1987, 4th studio album. Not my first Def Leppard album. In fact, one of my older brothers gave me Pyromania on cassette. So the 1983 album was actually my introduction to the band, and a lot of people would think, well, that one would become your favorite. But I think a lot of times, you know, when you're a young kid, when something becomes your own, that's the one you're going to latch onto. So I had these experiences with Rat, Poison, Def Leppard beforehand, but those were not mine. I was being introduced to that when a new album dropped, and that was the first thing that I was experiencing brand new. I think that's a lot of the reason that I've latched onto these. And of course, with all Desert Island albums, it's going to come down to your personal preference and a lot to do with your growing up and stuff of that nature. And so that's why a lot of these are ones that are from my youth. But I think the reason I love this album so much is the production on it. Robert John Muttling producing this thing, simply an amazing job, often thought of as the sixth Def Leppard member, and what he did for this album was amazing, giving him 7 hit singles on it. But every song on this one was amazing. So even though it's so overplayed because it is their biggest album, I heard it so many times, I don't know why, I can still go back to this thing time and time again. Coming in at number 3, the album that I consider actually the #1 rock album of all time, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction from 1987, their debut album. So my first Guns N' Roses album, because I did buy it. It's also the first album I ever bought myself. The Def Leppard Hysteria album, my mom bought for me with some Christmas money from a grandparent or something. So, you know, getting that was mine, but this was the first thing I went out to a store and I picked on my own. So there's a lot of great memory tied up in that. Part of it too, I had to talk my mom into letting me get it because it had a parental advisory sticker on it, and I've still got that great memory where she finally decided, okay, I will let you get this. And that was a big achievement, you know, as a young kid, again, getting your parent to agree to something that was controversial and so forth. But aside from that, the music really hit me. It was like nothing else out there at the time. There was so much stuff that was very polished. This was a very dirty, dangerous, sleazy sounding album. And what I really latched on to very early on was that each song sounded like it was made up of 2 or more songs, because there would be, you know, this part of a song and another part of the song, and it was basically like, well, we can't figure out how to finish it. Oh, hey, you got another song, let's just merge it together. But it made it so interesting. Case in point, song like Rocket Queen that kicks off one way, very down and dirty kind of hard rockin' song, finishing off very melodic in the end with so much melody and everything. And I just was blown away by that. It was something I'd never heard before, and I really felt like the album was complex and it has so much more going on to it. It was one of the first times that I sat down to really listen to what I was hearing, as opposed to just it's kind of on in the background and you dig it for what it is and so forth. And to this day, I can still sit down and listen to it very deeply and find new things in it. And if you're going to be on a desert island, you're going to want stuff that you can listen to intently, as well as just cool stuff you can have on in the background. At least that's my opinion. Number 2, Journey, their greatest hits from 1988, the first compilation of hits, at least, that they put out, because they did have a compilation of earlier stuff from before Steve Perry was part of the group, but first one of the big hits and all that sort of stuff. Now, not my first Journey album, or exposure to it at least, because again, here's the thing with my older brothers. I heard Frontiers growing up from 1983 a lot. But this was the first thing that I bought and had by the band. And you know, it's a compilation, but it had 2 songs that didn't appear on any albums that came from soundtracks. So it was like having 2 brand new songs that you could only get this way. And so that made it something more for me to get. You know, my opinions of compilations back then were very different. I didn't want to buy something that I already owned versions of, kind of stuff like that. So when there was something a little extra special or unreleased or hard to get or whatever on the albums, I liked that. So this was the first Journey album that I had in my collection, even though it's a greatest hits. And it just was one that, you know, there was a little bit of something from all the different albums and the big hits and the things I could tune into. And it's funny because today I still think of the sequencing of this album. If I hear one of these songs, I'm expecting the next one from this greatest hits to come on, as opposed to the ones that are on the albums themselves. And so I've got a lot tied into this because I listened to it so many times. But another thing, it was just also a great album to fall asleep to. So depending upon my mood, maybe the Judas Priest isn't the one because it's too heavy. This one here, Journey, would be one of the other ones. And again, as I said, I like to be functional. Okay, and the #1 desert island album pick that I would bring with me, if I could only have one, it would be this one here. Pink Floyd, Division Bell from 1994, their 14th studio album. My first Pink Floyd album was actually Dark Side of the Moon. I had gotten it 2 years earlier as a 20th anniversary release kind of a thing. And I was a fan and I enjoyed that and I loved that and everything here. But this one here was my first Pink Floyd. It was the first thing that, as a fan of Pink Floyd, that they put out, and it hit me hard. The announcement of this, the pomp, the circumstance, everything behind it. I had never seen a band so big and so huge as Pink Floyd. I didn't understand like who this band was, the magnitude of everything. Radio stations promoted the announcement of this, the tour, the broadcast of it live, the fact that they had airships painted up as these fishes that were promotional to promote the announcement, how they did this. I think it was on an aircraft carrier or something. But it was just this huge, huge thing. The hoopla and everything behind it really hit me, and it just made me want to be a part of it. And then the album came out and I loved it, and I love it from start to finish. And to this day, this is still my favorite Pink Floyd album. Now, I have a favorite Pink Floyd album from back in the day with Roger Waters when he was still part of it, and that goes to Animals. But if I gotta have one, it is going to be Pink Floyd's Division Bell. And this one here, on top of that, is another great one to fall asleep to. So, as I said, gotta have some, albums and things in there that are gonna do multiple things for you. And so there you go. Those are my top 10 Desert Island albums. I've got stuff from classic rock, I've got glam rock, I've got prog rock, I've got heavy metal, I've got a little bit something from all the different genres that I love so much. And so I think if I took these 10, I think I could actually really be happy. Some hits collections, some albums, not the most popular, some the most popular, again, a little bit of everything. At least that's how I approach it. I'm sure you guys would approach it a little bit differently. You're going to have different selections because we all have our own opinions. But, there you go. It's going to keep me entertained, and I'm going to be able to fall asleep at night. And there you go. If I'm stuck on a desert island, these are for me. But let me know which ones you like. Otherwise, take care. Have a good one. And I'll be talking to y'all real soon. Bye-bye, everyone.